Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. Breaking Silos aims to showcase the remarkable work of marketing professionals and their non-marketing colleagues from different departments across campus who come together to achieve common goals, implement new initiatives, enhance the student experience, and foster better collaboration among teams. Hosted by Shane Biglini, who leads marketing at Muhlenberg College, each episode of Breaking Silos will feature a marketer and their non-marketing colleague to talk about that partnership. This unique format will inspire marketers to try new things and connect with colleagues in new ways, while also allowing non-marketing professionals an inside look at some of the most collaborative projects in higher ed marketing. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Breaking Silos wherever you get your podcasts.
Content is changing so quickly. Just keeping up with trends is almost exhausting because, it could be tomorrow and whatever content is today is yesterday. And it's no longer going to be of interest maybe to that student, or it's not going to catch their attention the way that you would hope that it would.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 47 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Throughout the year, I get asked by different senior admissions and marketing leaders for names of people they should keep an eye on. So when I started this pod a couple of years ago, one of the things I have tried to do each season is bring talented, what I'll call rising stars onto the pod, just as a way to let them talk about some of the cool things they're doing and just introduce the higher ed masses to, again, some of the many talented people that exist in this industry. That list includes my guest today, Ty Garricken, who is a marketing content specialist for Ball State University. And when I asked some of the people who know Ty a lot better than I do to describe him, they used phrases like very intellectual and analytical. He sees the bigger picture and does a lot of that important behind the scenes type work that I think a lot of us are like, yeah, nobody notices that, when I can promise you a lot more people than you realize notice that. So welcome to the show, Ty.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
So Ty is from Indiana, and then those of you who have listened to the pod long enough know I reside just south of Indianapolis. And so Ty, you're from a town called Huntingburg, Indiana. Full disclosure, I had to look it up on a map, even though I've lived in Indiana for a long time. So it's a population of less than 10,000 people down in the southwest corner by Jasper. When you were growing up, talk to me about things that interested you. I mean, what were some of the things, even when you hit your high school years or even your junior high years, that were things that kind of got your attention?
Yeah, Huntingburg is a traditional small town in, rural Indiana, very small roots type of place. Everybody kind of knows everyone. And I grew up playing sports like most everyone does, I think, when you're a Hoosier, right? I played baseball for many years, but those adolescent years, I think, were a big change for me. I had moved schools at one point, and I think I went through some type of like self-discovery stage. and I was trying to figure out, who I was and what I enjoyed. And music became a really big part of, I think, my identity and who I was. And I mean, I was a teenager in the mid 2000s, right? And so skateboard culture was really big, and my best friend and I were like, we are not good at this. but we were good at playing guitar. And so I remember even at that time thinking, are we making a bad choice by stopping sports and playing music instead? Like, what will our families think, right? Because we cared a lot at that time about what that meant for us. And so, I mean, primarily through high school, yeah. I mean, I was really getting into the arts and music and creating and writing and drawing. And I think that's really kind of what ushered me into this kind of world of graphics and design marketing.
And so do you feel like from a creative standpoint, that started to develop as you got more interested in the arts then? Or do you feel like, I think that's something that I kind of had, whether I knew it or not, which is maybe what led me to the arts in the first place and more away from, say, the athletic world?
I think I was always creative. I always loved to draw as a kid. I loved to like role play. Like I just thought media and movies and things were just so cool. I was very impressionable, I guess you could say, in that capacity. But I don't think it was until I got to be like a junior or senior in high school that I learned that you can make a career out of this in some capacity. I joined our yearbook really just for fun because I was like, oh, this will be a neat class. But I really kind of flexed, I think, a little bit. And I eventually became the editor in chief of our yearbook my senior year. And so I was like, hey, maybe this will be a make or break opportunity, because I knew I wanted to go to college. My parents and my family had really kind of encouraged me to do so. And I was a first generation college student for my family. It kind of became a rite of passage. I had a teacher who really encouraged me to pursue that. And she was like, yeah, these are some great schools. Maybe journalism is kind of your pathway forward.
So I'm curious your answer to this question because I feel like it's changed a lot. So I'm a 90s college grad. You're obviously a little farther along than that. And now we're working right with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. When you as a first gen are thinking, all right, I'm going to go to college, what was the purpose in your brain, if you can remember, of like, here's why I go to college other than my parents encouraging me to?
I mean, that was the mindset at the time, was your parents told you to do. So that's kind of was the direction. I mean, for my own personal reasons, I always felt like I was the type of person who I would always try to create my own direction. I cared more about what my personal interests were, I think, than what was expected of me. And so for college, I mean, I didn't grow up with a lot. I mean, my parents didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have college educations, and not that those things were synonymous with each other necessarily or anything. Like, my parents were successful in a lot of different ways. But I wanted something better for me, and I was an only child. And so there was a lot of pressure, I think, put on me to find some type of success. And my parents wanted me really to stay close to home, but that wasn't me. I really wanted to challenge myself and try something different, try something new. I was comfortable with leaving home if that's what I thought was best for me. And at the time it definitely was. But not to say that I wasn't a little terrified of what that might look like for me.
So you decide to go to Ball State, you decide to do multimedia journalism, and you just talked about, gosh, it's scary, right? This transition from high school to college. Talk to me a little bit about how the transition from high school to college then was hard for you. Do you remember some of the things you really struggled with?
I mean, I think for a while it was difficult to be away from home. I only went to Ball State with two other people from my graduating class. And all of my close friends went to Indiana University in Bloomington. So I think that was the hardest part. Was I always had a close friend circle that I relied on and spent a lot of my time with. And so when I was kind of to my own devices, I didn't really know what to do with my time.
How do you figure
So
that
when I
out?
wasn't in class, yeah, it was music. Kind of going back, I think, to where I started. Uh, I had bought a guitar when I graduated high school. That was my gift to myself. And it became a bit of a crutch for me, but in a good way. I know crutch can maybe sound like a bad thing, but I mean, I tried to keep my door open in my resident hall, and I would play guitar, and people would pop their head in and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" It caught people's attention, and not knowing anyone, I was, maybe at the time I didn't realize it, but yeah, I mean, I think I was trying to make friends and trying to keep myself occupied so that I wasn't just constantly thinking of home, or hey, maybe I should transfer. Like, maybe this isn't where I need to be.
I wonder with this generation, I have this conversation, Ty, with a lot of leaders. And by this generation, again, I mean Gen Z. This idea that I always say, right, they've been parented differently. They've grown up with technology. They have gone through school differently than I would argue somebody, for example, in my generation did. So you're at college, you're away from home, you hardly know anybody. You don't have a sibling who's been able to kind of say, hey, here's what you're going to deal with. Where do you
Mhm.
think some of the skills you developed to just give you, for lack of a better term, the strength to say, all right, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to learn how to deal with some of this stuff and not always have to run back to my parents, run back to other people that I trust and try to figure it out. Like, where do you think any of that comes from in all of us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think for me, just draw on personal experience. I mean, being an only child, I think kind of helped because I was always really good at self-entertaining. Like I said, whether it was with guitar or it was with arts and creativity in some capacity. So I think it's trying to find some type of way to temper those skills into a strength, if you will. And I can't speak for everyone. I mean, I definitely have friends or people that I knew that went to college and they decided maybe this college wasn't right for me and they moved closer to home. I really wanted to challenge myself and I didn't want to backtrack on something that I thought I was actually doing for the better of me.
So you decide at some point to join the orientation crew at Ball State. Why did you do that? And just, is there anything that you think you really took from that experience that made you go, huh, maybe higher ed is like a path I want to explore as I like finish up college and think about what I'm going to do in my professional career?
And your hunch is right. So I kind of applied to be an orientation leader a little bit on a fluke. Had a great freshman year at college. I made some really good friends with the people that I lived with in my resident hall and on my floor. And I think one of my friends had popped in and was like, "Hey, orientation leader applications are open. Like, do you think we should do this? We'd get a hangout all summer." And I was like, "Yeah." And so I applied, and I remember one of my best friends was actually in my interview, and we're still friends today. I mean, 10 years, 12, 15 years after, graduating or going to Ball State and things like that. But I got hired, and I had constantly questioned why. Because I wasn't sure what I had brought to the table. I had these thoughts of transferring. I was like, I didn't feel like I was this super spirited student at Ball State. I was like, I'm just trying to find my way. And Ball State did provide a home for me. And so I think that almost became a catalyst for applying for the position because I was like, hey, if I can meet other students where they are who are uncomfortable about moving away from home or trying to find their home at Ball State, um, maybe I have something to give there. And I remember having a detailed conversation before I had moved back to campus for the summer for training. And one of my supervisors, her name's Lindsay, and she's still a fantastic mentor to me today. I'm fortunate that I get to work with her. She's still at Ball State, and she had said, she's like, "No, we see something in you, and we're gonna try and exploit that a little bit and help you develop skills you need to help you find more of your place at Ball State, but also continue this legacy that Ball State creates, these welcoming community for students."
So do you think, thinking back then, that whether it was the conversation with Lindsay or it was something else, Ty, I mean, it would have been easy, right? For you to say, yeah, okay, this is hard or this is uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do this anymore. What was it then, again, that made you go, no, I'm going to like do this because, to your point, what you just said, maybe this is going to give me an opportunity to help other students like me. And that's what was the motivation then to really continue to, like, again, persevere is the word I'll use, through something that maybe wasn't planned and might have been a little uncomfortable?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the other orientation leaders that I had been hired with that summer, we had made really great connections. And I still think about those people even today quite fondly, just because they were great supporters. And we did our best to not only work hard that summer, but we also knew how to have fun. And I think that I try to think of that with every job that I take. And one of our mottos for that summer, and I can't remember if it was Lindsay who coined it or who it might have been, but we always had this mindset of it's week one, day one, every single day. Because Ball State's orientation program today, and even at the time, was a 2-day program or a day and a half. And it ran for like 9 weeks. I mean, started beginning of June, ran through mid-July. And so for us, as excited as we were that very first week in June to meet those new students coming in and do our jobs, by you got to mid-July, it's sweltering hot and humid in Indiana. And, students are not as excited to be there because they're like, well, this is miserable. It's so hot and we have to be outside. But with us having this mindset of it's week one, day one, we got to bring the energy every day, because while these students, this is their first day on campus, despite it's our 100th time or 100, whatever it may be, the students that we've met. And so we need to bring the energy every day. We need to meet them where they are and ensure that they're having a positive experience, even though every day might not be so easy for us.
Well, and it's such an important point, because even today, right, as colleges continue to recruit students and they come to campus for, campus visits, or they come to an admitted student there, to that point, Ty, you may have, as a staff member, done, I've done 20 of these, I've done hundreds of these. Yeah, but it's the first time for them. And so if you're not on, or you're having a bad day, again, which you're entitled to, we're all human, we have them. But I always try to explain to people, those students don't care, because they have their own problems and they're just trying to figure out. And so, having a model like that, I think absolutely it goes back to me, this idea of mindset, right? Like, what's your mindset every day? The obvious question then becomes, you graduate from Ball State, you've done all this stuff at Ball State. How the heck do we end up at Marian University as an admissions counselor and not Ball State?
That's probably the longest road I've taken. So I graduated and I had moved a couple of times. My wife, my now wife, we met my senior year at Ball State. She got a job in Fort Wayne. So I had moved up there with her. We were like, hey, this is a promising career for you. That ended up working out. I had an opportunity at Evansville, and so we moved down there for a short time. That didn't end up working out. Well, all our friends are in Indy, and there's opportunity in Indianapolis. So we saved up everything we had. We made the move to Indianapolis. And I mean, I worked at Best Buy full time for about 9 months before an opportunity finally knocked on the door, and I got an in at a college, and it was at the University of Indianapolis. And I was there for a year in their registrar's office, and it was a neat experience. I learned a lot. I'd never worked in a registrar's office before, but I didn't see any potential to move within. And I was like, I think that this is an opportunity for me to try and do something that is a challenge, but also is going to be better for my personal and professional development. And so I started looking into grad school, because I was applying for all these admissions jobs. I after working orientation, I was a tour guide. We kind of make the joke now, we don't think there's a job that Ty didn't work in undergrad admissions at Ball State as a student. But I was applying for all these admissions jobs, and I'd get to the final interviews, and it was always, hey, we think you'd be great, but this other person, they've got a master's degree, they just have more experience than you, or relative experience than you. We're going to go with them. And so my mindset was kind of like, well, maybe I need a master's degree. And so I'd started looking at Ball State, because I was like, hey, let's see what home has to offer, and I'll try to make the best decision from there. And so I reached out to a few colleagues of mine that had been in the student affairs program at Ball State, and I'd known people who had gone through it and had heard great experiences about it. And the assistantship opportunity that the student affairs, or SAAHE, program offered at Ball State was very intriguing to me. And so whenever you apply for that program, you have to interview for an assistantship. And so they have a huge interview day. I went and I interviewed for a couple of different offices, and financial aid ended up being one of them. And I knew who I knew who the hiring manager was for that office. And I ended up getting that opportunity and doing grad school for the next year. And I liked that it was short form. My wife had just started going to law school, so we were in school at the same time, which in retrospect, I'm like, was that a good idea? Wasn't it? But she had a little bit longer than me. So I was excited to get in, get out, get the experience I needed, and hopefully lead to a promising career. And as hesitant as I was being in a financial aid office, it was so helpful. I think it taught me a lot, especially with accessibility and other things. But I remember the last day of my internship or assistantship, I'd gotten a call from Marion after I'd interviewed with them. Had a great experience. The director at the time, who I still admire just as a professional to this day, she was from like near my hometown. And so we had a connection, and I thought the team was great. And, but it was going to be a different experience just because it was such a smaller school. And I'd only known Ball State really up until that point. But I got the call the very last day of my assistantship, rounding out grad school. And so, yeah, summer 2018, I had jumped onto the ship at Marion University, and I would be there for 3 years.
So you do orientation things and all kinds of other stuff at Ball State. You go and do work in a registrar's office. You do work in a financial aid office. You do work in an admissions office. Mm-hmm. And then you pivot again and decide to go to the marketing side where you are now. Mm-hmm. If you're comfortable sharing, Ty, what was it that you felt like was missing? Because you had an opportunity, right? It's not like you weren't on a college campus. It's not mm-hmm. like, again, I know some of those jobs are probably more front-facing with students than others, but do you remember, was there just anything where you're like, okay, these jobs are great and I'm learning a lot, but something's missing? And what was that something?
Yeah. So my undergrad degree is in journalism graphics. And probably my junior, senior year, that was where I started kind of pivoting. And I was like, I didn't know, I think most people would say this who work in higher ed. I didn't know there was a career in higher ed, right? I did the internship within my office now when I was a senior, and I said, hey, this will be a make or break opportunity for me. Let's see if higher ed is the way to go. And so that was when I completely pivoted outside of like doing graphics and multimedia journalism, those types of things, and decided to go the higher ed route. But I'd still use those skills in a lot of ways. And primarily when I was at Marion, the first NACAC conference I went to was in Louisville. And when I was there, our president at the time, during our meeting, had asked, hey, we're going through this rebrand. We are creating and developing a new website that goes along with the branding. We've hired a contractor, but we just need somebody internally who can kind of help with this process. And so I raised my hand because I thought, well, I have experience in this area, and it's not something I use a whole lot anymore, but I'm interested. And so I raised my hand, and I had joined this ad hoc committee for the Indiana ACAC website. And that following February, the president had pulled me aside at our state conference and said, we are so happy with the way that the website is turning out, and our communications chair is actually dropping off. Would you be interested in being the new communications chair? I said, okay. And from there, I mean, I had all these toys to play with, right? I had this new brand. We were developing the website, and I was like, we need marketing materials to really help push our membership. We need sponsorship pieces for our conference, and we need a conference program that's not just a Word document. I just feel like an ACAC could do so much more just by using skills that we have internally. And I had been in that position for a couple of years, and in the meantime, I had transitioned outside of Marion back to Ball State for a financial aid opportunity. I was ready to move on. I mean, it was post-pandemic. I was no longer really interested, especially after not traveling for a while. I was kind of like, I'm kind of ready to set my roots down a little bit. I don't know that I want to be a road warrior so much anymore. And this opportunity opened at Ball State, so I went into the financial aid office there, continued to support the Indiana ACAC as a communications chair and kind of subsequently technology as well, just because they kind of go hand in hand. And it was actually at our state conference in 2000, I guess it would have been 22. Yeah. One of the sessions that we had was about leadership in the Indiana ACAC. And so all of the chairs had gotten in front of any members that wanted to attend the session to learn a little bit more about what we as committees do and all these other things. And so I gotten up and I said, hey, we maintain the brand, we develop all the communications, the marketing pieces, so on and so forth. And my current supervisor had approached me afterwards and she said, I didn't know you did all this. And I said, yeah, I did. And she said, I have a job opportunity for you if you're interested. We are looking to expand our marketing within the admissions office at Ball State. And I mean, I know you work two floors up from her office and where I was at the time. And so I was like, yeah, send me information. I'd be happy to. And I was having so much fun with the Indiana ACAC things. And I mean, financial aid wasn't my first love. It was absolutely admissions and just from the experiences that I'd had. And so I wasn't opposed to saying no to this opportunity. But I remember having many conversations with my wife. Is this the right move? Just because one felt safe and the other felt risky, especially because I had a lot of imposter syndrome around the graphics. And I was like, I mean, I haven't done this in several years apart from just volunteer experience and other things. But someone wants to pay me to design stuff for them? That's crazy.
Hey there, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Higher ed is facing a leadership crisis. The demands on today's college and university leaders are skyrocketing, and talent is leaving the industry at an unprecedented rate. New leaders like you are emerging, but no one is getting the proper training to be successful. Well, Enrollify is here to change that. Our new course, Lessons in Leadership, taught by Dr. Carrie Phillips, will prepare you to be a confident, empathetic, and effective leader. From systems thinking to adaptive leadership, building culture to handling difficult decisions, this comprehensive online course is perfect for new and aspiring leaders. Don't wait. The course starts September 9th, and for a lucky group of 26 students, we have the option to add interactive sessions with Dr. Phillips for personalized guidance. Visit enrollify.org to learn more.
You now are in this world pretty heavily of higher ed, and we'll call it enrollment marketing. If you had to describe the state of content marketing right now, Ty, in higher ed, what would you say?
I think it's a very challenging and impressionable field to be in. I do have a younger half sister. She's 10 years younger than me. So we didn't grow up together or anything. But just seeing the generational differences on how we digest and use media is so different. I mean, I'm on the younger end of the millennial spectrum. And I mean, she's right there in the thick of just being a Gen Z. She just graduated or is graduating from Ball State here pretty soon. The current generation of students, like I said, is just very impressionable. They're constantly on social media like TikTok and other things. And that's how they get their news. That's how they absorb information. And I think tacking into that is very important. And I think now more than ever, it's important that we understand our students before they even get to campus.
So then what within that, you talk about challenges, because I would argue, and again, we can go back, I got to do some quick math here, 30 to 35 years when I was in high school. And I have a daughter, as I said earlier, who's going to be a high school freshman. And the running joke is Olivia, my daughter's name, Olivia, we didn't have cell phones. And Olivia, the internet didn't exist, let alone social media. Technology always is evolving, right? And so the fact that Gen Z, I would argue, is just that much more visual because of how much technology's evolved probably shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. So what makes it then that much more challenging in your brain to be a content marketer marketing to that group because of all of the, again, um, just ways that content has to change now because of the way it's being consumed by younger generations?
I think that's the answer right there, is that content is changing so quickly. Just keeping up with trends is almost exhausting because, I mean, it could be tomorrow, and whatever content is today is yesterday. And it's no longer going to be of interest maybe to that student, or it's not going to catch their attention the way that you would hope that it would. And I think also a challenging part of today's marketing is that you have tools that make it so easy for somebody who maybe is not as maybe visually inclined, right? And I don't say that, to offend anyone necessarily, but with tools like Canva, I mean, with templates and other things, you have people that are doing a lot of the work ahead of time. And so it's easy to be able to go in and make something look very pleasing, which is great. But also, I often worry about how misleading that can sometimes be because, I mean, a great marketing piece may be able to sell an experience, but maybe that experience isn't quite what the student is expecting either. So I think the authenticity that goes into pieces is also important. And I try to think of that when I get into my flow of, what is the message I'm trying to convey? Really just taking myself back rather than, okay, this is a message that's going to be about housing on campus. Well, what is the housing experience like for students? We can show our resident halls all day. I mean, Ball State's fortunate to have very nice resident halls, but a lot of other campuses in Indiana and even nearby do as well. So how do we feature what's important and how students will utilize those? And so I think being able to tap into that and display that in a visually pleasing way that also shares a story and a message is ultimately what's going to keep a student tapped in and tuned in.
I love where you went with that, and it makes me wonder, and I just love to get your thoughts on this. We
Sure.
know how visual, right, Gen Z is. And Gen Alpha is not going to be any less visual. I feel confident
Oh,
in
no.
making that statement, right? Once AI becomes more at scale and everything else. So why do you think then, Ty, so many admissions and enrollment marketing and marketing offices on college campuses, they continue to be so much more, let's shove all these words right into your face and down your throat instead of saying, let's show you more of this? Like, what's the disconnect? Is it because I understand not every campus has the same staff size, budget, all of that. So I know some of that factors into
Right.
it. That's the easy answer, right? But why do you think content marketers have not said, to your point, where we kind of started this part of the conversation, well, we know they're so visual and we know, technology continue. Why then are we not showing and having more visual content as content marketers? Where do you think the disconnect is?
I think part of it, and I don't know if it's just from my perception that college and education has this traditionalist view of things. I feel like as a younger professional, a lot of what I've done is really just trying to show rather than say, this is what we need to be doing. And I think that there's some apprehension to moving a new way forward, probably because things are moving so fast. And well, we've done this for the longest time and this is what's worked. So why would we change that? And I think that a lot of professionals more at the administrative level are starting to see those trends. We're seeing the drop off come off in, I mean, another year or two, right? And so I think it goes back to, we need to understand what those trends are, and we need to realize and look at data and review how these communications are performing, and seeing that students may spend less than a couple seconds looking at an email. They are looking for key points. They're looking for maybe buttons or visual representations of things and maybe not reading the content that supports it. And so I think we need to adapt how we are tapping into our students. And I mean, I have a younger sister, right? I mentioned before, and being 10 years younger than me, I kind of mentioned how we digest information recently. I remember she was staying the night with my wife and I one time, and me and her were playing a video game. And, or rather she was playing and I was watching, and she was doing something in it. And she was like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, did you talk to that guy? And she was like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, what did he say? I mean, I played this before, so I knew what she was supposed to do. She's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? You said you talked to him. She's like, well, yeah, but I didn't read it. So, I mean, I think case in point, right? That she's less interested in the dialogue that went with it rather than just, well, what's my next goal? And I think that students do the same thing when they look at an email or something like that. If they see a colorful button, they're like, ooh, I'm going to punch that because I know that's going to do something. So what's the call to action? And I think that's really what we need to be setting students up with, is we need to provide them with a call to action rather than just info dumping on them and expecting them to read it and expecting some type of outcome whenever necessarily that's not what they're looking for.
And I want to go back real quick because I think this will be helpful for a lot of people. You talked about how fast, right, content is changing and how trends, obviously, we know on social change all the times. Has your process then changed at all in the last couple of years, Ty, when you're trying to come up with content ideas? Meaning, okay, maybe I did a little bit of this or none of this a couple of years ago, and now because of that, so what in your process, like talk us through that, has changed, or are you maybe doing more of because of what we just discussed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for me, it's required a lot more forethought and planning whenever I'm looking at a piece. I need to know what the message is. I need to know what type of story that we're trying to tell. And I like to ask questions and details, right? Because a lot of the projects that I take on are initiatives by my supervisor, but also, directors for our international or graduate or undergraduate areas, respectively. And they're like, I want to reach out to my audience in this specific way. I'm like, okay, excellent. Well, knowing that, what is your call to action, as I kind of mentioned before? And then from there, it's gathering details about, what type of students do we want to show? Do we want to show action of students in immersive learning opportunities? Do we want to show them in the classroom or the student life aspect? Do we want a variety of those types of things? So I think it's really playing into the audience and understanding from the beginning what is the message in the story, because all day I can try and design something that I think is visually pleasing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's any bones to it. And so I've had to spend a lot more time looking on social media or looking at a variety of different pathways to see, like, how are students digesting information? What are the things that they want to see? Even seeing what other colleges are doing too. I mean, I think it's great for us to learn from each other because we can support each other in that way too.
I appreciate you sharing that. And it then leads me to wonder, we all fail, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning you're going to do a bunch of these projects, and again, some are going to work and some aren't going to resonate as much. And you're going to be like, boy, I really thought that one was going to land. How do you deal with failure, knowing that, again, it's totally normal for all of us? There's not a single human, right, Ty, that hasn't failed and won't fail again. Any just advice you would give somebody, whether they're a content marketer, an admissions counselor, or they're not even in higher ed and they're listening to this? What helps you deal with failure?
I mean, failure is never an easy thing to deal with. And I think people should first realize that. And I almost feel like I go through a bit of a grieving process, like on a small scale, whenever it comes to small failures. Like I spent all this time putting this project together and then it just missed the mark, right? And I need to remember and I need to reflect and take personal time for me to realize that's not necessarily a reflection of me, right? And my skill. It doesn't make me less of a designer or a professional just because one project didn't supersede the next one. It's definitely a challenging thing. And, I really rely on the people that surround me, whether it's my wife, my family, my friends, or even my coworkers, to, hey, what do you think worked here? What didn't? And then ask those questions about, what can I do maybe better for the next time? Because if you internalize it, it's only going to get worse. And as difficult as it can be to put it behind you and just move on to the next project or try a different approach, maybe even completely start from scratch and just be like, hey, that didn't work, but it's not necessarily that I'm completely trashing this project. I learned a lot from my mistakes, and I'm going to use that, hone it, harness it, do whatever I got to do to try and make the next thing better.
Well, all of those things, to your point, I completely agree with them. Go back to, again, the concept of just, it starts with your mindset, right? Like if you want to feel sorry for yourself and just like start digging that hole, to your point, yep, that's exactly what's going to happen. And you're going to feel sorry for yourself, and it's probably not going to go in a good direction. Or if you can recognize, okay, it's not necessarily that these students are saying, Ty, you suck as a content marketer, stop producing content, right? They're just saying, for whatever reason on that day, this didn't land. And I do think it's important, going back to what you just said, then to figure out as best you can, okay, why didn't it land? Is it, there wasn't enough visuals? Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm very hard on myself. I mean, I am my own worst critic, and I know that. And my wife sometimes like, Ty, come on. Like, and I think it's just recognizing, like, I mean, you do the best you can with what you got, and you learned and you move on to live another day. And I think marketers should also know that, design is subjective. English is probably the most complicated language, right? There's probably 10 or 1,200 maybe different ways that you could write a sentence. But what is the meaning of it, and how can you just condense it down? Or if you're just looking at a design and, hey, I think that something might look pleasing or great to the next person, and somebody else might say, it doesn't really work for me, or that picture I don't think works for these reasons. I think that having intent that goes behind it goes a really long way, rather than just being like, I thought the picture looked nice, right? It needs to, like I said, tell that story. And if you can defend that, excellent. But just know, I mean, you're not going to please everyone, and that's okay.
So then where does your interest in leadership come from? I mean, do you remember, was there a certain point? I had Jay Jacobs on in a previous episode. He's the vice president now at University of Vermont. And he was just talking about early on remembering, oh yeah, leadership's 100% something I want to do. So where was it getting involved in the Indiana ACAC stuff, or has it been through other opportunities that you're like, okay, this leadership thing seems interesting to me?
Yeah, I think Indiana ACAC was a large contributor to that thinking and that notion. I feel like, and again, I mentioned I'm hard on myself, but I feel like a lot of my leadership opportunities always came by happenstance and by me taking a risk. I don't think it was ever something that I said, yeah, I want to be in that position. I think it's something that I'm like, I aspire to do that, and I will work to get there, but it's not something I feel like I need to do right now. I've slowly kind of worked my way up there, and I'm very thankful and fortunate. I think that, maybe other people look up or, look to me for direction and maybe communication or technology for Indiana ACAC, or maybe even my current role, asking my opinion about, hey, does this design work? Does this photo work? Like, do you have any opinions on what maybe I could do better? So on and so forth. More than anything, I just try to do the best that I can every day. And, but I never really looked at it as, this is what my end goal is. It's kind of like, I'm here for the ride, and I'll continue working hard and just doing the best that I can each and every day.
Fun rapid fire, Ty, is how I end every pod. So I'm going to ask you a handful of things, and I would just love some quick, immediate feedback from you on each. Okay.
Sure.
Beach or mountains? Which one if you have to pick?
Beach.
All right, let's test your Indiana trivia. Which well-known cartoon cat creator grew up about 40 miles from the Ball State campus?
Jim Davis.
Look at that. And I didn't know that. Garfield.
Did
No,
you
I had
not?
no idea. I didn't know that. Garfield, though.
He actually, a couple of years ago, came back to campus and was teaching classes in the art department. Yeah.
So you talked about playing the guitar. What's the hardest part of learning how to play the guitar?
I could say theory, which I feel like is the easy answer, but I think it's also just confidence. It's confidence.
Favorite video game to play as a kid?
The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time.
I'll date myself. Mine was Super Mario Brothers and NBA 2K.
I love those too.
And rumor has it you're also a big James Bond fan. So what's the best Bond movie? You got to pick one.
I do. It's Casino Royale.
Why?
2006, Daniel Craig. So that was such a trivial time for the franchise. They got through the 90s, and I love Pierce Brosnan. But the campiness was getting a little up there. It was such a pivotal moment. Oh gosh, I think you're going to regret asking me this because I can get up my soapbox. Casino Royale was not only the first book that Ian Fleming wrote for James Bond, but it was also a complete rebranding of the franchise. And so they were trying to bring it into a more modern time, considering like Mission Impossible and Jason Bourne and those types of movies. And so they really leaned into the psyche of Bond. You saw Daniel Craig bleed. You saw him get hurt both physically and emotionally. And the story is just incredible. It's just so much going on with it. And to this day, I think anybody who's never seen a James Bond movie can watch that one and appreciate it, regardless of whether or not they care about who the character is.
Ty, I appreciate you being on today and just being so open and transparent and sharing a lot of things that I think are going to help a lot of people.
Thank you so much for letting me tell my story. It's been a pleasure.
Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.